Our insight and analysis are Eugene Robinson of the Washington Post, Molly Ball of the Atlantic Magazine, NBC's Andrea Mitchell, and radio talk show host Hugh Hewitt. Welcome to Sunday. It's Meet the Press.
From NBC News in Washington, this is Meet the Press with Chuck Todd.
Campaign. And of course, Hugh Hewitt, radio talk show host, who has been a must-stop for all the Republican candidates. I can't wait, though, till you and Hillary Clinton tussle.
I'm looking forward to it.
I think she ought to do it. I think she ought to do it. I think it'll be very interesting. Hugh, let me get your reaction to this. It's sort of, you saw it in the piece. Trump supporters don't care if he gets fact-checked, and don't care if the fact-checks prove to be, false.
Trump supporters are like Lincoln Chafee, blocks of granite. And they are not moving easily, and they're not going to move over the 9/11 story. And fact-checkers are themselves perceived to be agenda-driven in many respects, and they would like to see an equal amount of time given to Hillary Clinton's claim to being under sniper fire in Bosnia or trying to join the Marine Corps or any of her as are given to Donald Trump. But here's the key thing. Elizabeth Loftus is the professor at the University of California, Irvine, who has done a TED Talk on memory, which people have to watch because memory is different from facts. You cannot fact-check memory.
No, and that's the thing. You can't crawl inside his head.
But you can fact-check events, though.
Yeah,
that's right.
The events he's talking about did not happen.
Right.
The reporter whose work he cites says they were unconfirmed reports. Gee, I don't remember anything. The
and by the way,
General,
3 weeks later, the Newark Star-Ledger re-reported the rumors and said it was a vicious rumor that was started.
And the then Attorney General of New Jersey says, no, we checked it out. It was a false report. It did not happen.
It's not only that didn't happen. 200,000 Syrian refugees are coming. It's not only that the facts are wrong, it's that what he is saying is so emotionally and politically powerful. Right. He is lighting fires. He is turning people against people. He is misstating the facts of what's happening domestically, what's happening with Muslims. It's that the kinds of facts that he is misstating are so, so much
incendiary.
But here's the political genius of Donald Trump, right? What he is doing is different. All politicians say things that are technically true, but a little bit misleading or a lot misleading. They say whatever they can get away with, and if they're called on it, they'll walk it back a little bit. They'll trim their sails.
Truth is conditional.
Yeah, they'll use
as we found out, right? Mostly true, half true.
Reasoning. They'll just talk about the definition of is. Donald Trump doesn't do that. He creates an entire alternate reality, and he does not back
because he pays no price for
and
it with his supporters.
to people. It is seductive to people because it's the world they want to live in.
Well,
even
we live
if
in
it's not the real world.
We contended this weekend first that are we living in a post-truth world? What's interesting here? What do voters want? They want honesty, or do they want something else? Let me put up two different poll comparisons that we did in our last poll about the honest and trustworthy question between Trump and Hillary Clinton and the temperament question between Trump and Hillary Clinton. And look at this. Donald Trump is seen as more honest and straightforward among all voters than Hillary Clinton is. That would be quite alarming if you're Hillary Clinton. Now look at the temperament question. And this number is almost reversed. It's Hillary Clinton that is seen as viewed as having the better temperament versus Donald Trump. Peter Hart contends, Hugh, that it's better to be seen as having the right temperament than being the most honest and straightforward.
Well, and I think both of those are going to be eclipsed by who can deliver safety. I think after Paris, the axis of the race shifted, and people are looking for who will make them safe. And we mentioned in the green room, there's a New York Times piece today on Libya by David Kirkpatrick and Eric Schmidt about the fact that Libya has become ISIS 2.0, and there will be another terrorist attack. And if there is one in the United States like Paris, whoever promises safety, regardless of their trustworthiness, regardless of anything else, and can deliver, wins.
Well, in fact, 2 weeks ago here, right after Paris, I posited that Trump was going to benefit more than anyone else because he is big and strong. And it was counterintuitive, and I was a little nervous about saying it, but look at the numbers and the way Carson has slid, which we can talk about. But the fact is that Trump is positing that he can take care of people and raising people's fears, as you said, it's incendiary. And I think that the fact of truthfulness doesn't matter, especially when people like us are
By the way, let me just show you
doing the fact checking.
Well, it's funny you talk about this. Look, PolitiFact put this up, and I got to show you this. On the candidates that have had the mostly false or false ratings, 3 have had a majority of the facts that have been fact-checked by PolitiFact have been traded as false or mostly false, and it's the top 3 candidates on the Republican side. Carson Trump and Cruz. Eugene, basically it goes to Hugh's point.
Yeah.
The fact checkers are viewed as having an agenda, so the more they say you're wrong, the more to say they're right.
I know. And by the way, the fact checkers did fact check Hillary Clinton on her under fire claims. They fact checked. You know, I mean, it's not as if they haven't done all this stuff.
Intensity.
But
It's just intensity of coverage.
But who's, you know,
was
there's a
pretty
Republican
intense
campaign going on now, so who are you going to fact check now?
That's
You're
a
going
fair
to
point.
fact check
That's a
the
fair
Republican candidates. But, you know, I think you are right that safety and strength are the theme for this phase of the campaign. I am not sure that one can say right now that they are indeed the main themes of the entire campaign.
Can I ask you, know, when Hillary Clinton says the reset button worked because Medvedev was in power, that's just palpably false. Everyone knows Putin was running it. That doesn't get fact-checked every time she tries to explain away the reset button. That's why Republicans don't trust fact-checkers, because they allow her to slide with something like the reset button worked.
Welcome back. I want you to take a look at the front page of the New Hampshire Union Leader. And it's some big news for New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. He has secured perhaps the most important newspaper endorsement in the Republican primary season. The question now, will that endorsement give Christie, who has been struggling in low single digits in the polls, the momentum to launch a real challenge in the Granite State nationally, as well as nationally? Joining me now is the publisher of the New Hampshire Union Leader and the writer of that editorial, Joe McQuaid. Panel is also here. So, Joe.
Sir.
Chris Christie, first of all, tell us how you cut the field to get to the point where you decided to pick Chris Christie. He was among a group of how many that you were seriously considering for the endorsement?
I think we were really looking just at the governors. I think after the experience of the past 8 years, freshman senators without a lot of experience are not good. So we looked.
So you punished Cruz and Rubio for basically having the same resume as Barack Obama?
Yes. Punishment is sort of a harsh word from the union leaders.
Fair enough.
Perhaps?
Yes. Disparage, things of that nature. So it was the governors, and Walker didn't last long enough to really be under consideration. I'm not sure why Governor Perry didn't get any traction, but it was left with Kasich, Bush, and Christie. And from that, myself and my editorial writer and some people that I respect in the community, we looked, and Christie is the guy who can take the fight to Trump, Hillary, ISIS.
It was interesting. You seemed to say, we were talking earlier, Christie's the most Trump-like, and that was an asset in some ways.
It really is, because Americans seem to be fed up with Washington, and they're looking for somebody who speaks with the bark off, as we say in New Hampshire. And I think Christie does. As we said in the editorial, he does that knowing what he's talking about, as opposed to some others who don't.
Well, why Christie over Jeb Bush? Jeb Bush, you could argue, had a more successful tenure as governor. You know, Chris Christie had a lot of downgrades. The economic leadership in that state is at best at a standstill.
It's the worst state going in. Jeb Bush had one of the better states going in. Jeb Bush has not been a U.S. attorney, which I think is also a key in these troubled times. And Jeb Bush doesn't look like he wants it, and the public senses that. So I'm looking for somebody who can get the nomination, and I don't think either Bush or Kasich can do so.
Is it fair to exclude Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, though? I know the analogy to a freshman senator, but Ted Cruz doing well in Iowa now and showing his experience, showing he's got a lot of legal experience, he's highly educated. Why not someone like Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio?
Well, fairness in politics, not fair to exclude. But I take your point, but I don't think either one of these fine young guys has the administrative experience and knows how the buttons are pushed in Washington, in the government
circles. He knows
circles.
how to push buttons on bridges. And as a Republican primary voter, Bridgegate and the Second Amendment. How did you deal with those two issues?
Well, Second Amendment, Christie sort of waltzed around and came to a position which we could agree with, which is the Second Amendment rules. Bridgegate, I was astonished when I asked him what, if anything, he learned from this. And he said he learned not to be so trusting. And I said, you're a U.S. attorney, you trust people? But I think it shows that it's a big state, and he's weathered that. There are a couple of people who are under indictment. Nothing has tied Governor Christie to Bridgegate. I asked him when this trial is likely to happen. He said it's supposed to be in the spring. He suspects for some reason it will be in the fall. But I don't think they're going to lay a glove on Christie because I don't think he had anything to do with it.
You know, Chris Christie has been moving up in New Hampshire. He's not leading, however, in New Hampshire. Are the voters of New Hampshire looking for something different this time? Are they looking for a Donald Trump? Are you in tune this time? And realize you're a very powerful guy and your endorsement is very powerful in New Hampshire, but is this what the voters want?
We will see on February 9th if Secretary of State Gardner has the primary on that day. And all this business about polls and leading in the polls and poll-driven, I think has been damaging to the elections of the United States. It used to be that people, when I were in New Hampshire, got to pick. Now it's Fox and the other networks saying, we'll determine who gets on the stage.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the state of the race here, and then let's broaden the conversation out. Joe, we won't keep you on the hot seat. You get to just play panelist like with the rest of them. I want to show quickly, I want to shift it. Ted Cruz is having a moment. You brought up Ted Cruz here. I joked with you, Joe, that the previous writers of the Union Leader, the Loebs, the late Loebs, they probably would be Cruz people.
Well, Naki would still be going for Pat Buchanan.
She'd be going for Pat, but they'd probably be Cruz people. But Cruz is moving. And Jean, I wonder, and Molly, he seems to be moving at the expense of Carson.
I think that's true. I think it's also there. I was at a Trump rally in South Carolina this week, and almost literally every single person I spoke to, these are all Trump supporters, and if they had a second choice, a lot of them are just Trump or nothing, but if they had a second choice, it was Ted Cruz. And a lot of them want a Trump-Cruz or a Cruz-Trump ticket. And that was not the case a month or two ago. There was not that buzz. So Cruz really is gaining mind share among Republican primary voters. Carson is losing it, I think, partly because of the questions about his foreign policy acumen and the events overseas. See him as tough enough. They like that he's a healer. They like that he's a uniter, but he doesn't have that machismo that Trump has and that Cruz has to some extent.
You know, Hugh, tomorrow, bulk data collection of the NSA ends.
Yeah.
Okay? It totally ends. It's totally changed. Ted Cruz is on one side of that issue. Marco Rubio on the other. Marco Rubio supporters, a super PAC, 501c4, have hit Cruz on this. Is Cruz vulnerable?
Yes, he is. And the debate on the 15th, in which I'm a panelist, that will come up. If I have any hope to turn that towards a national security focus, that is a major deal, because the French were not able to follow, with the best homeland security in Europe, were not able to follow the terrorists who attacked Paris, and the collection of metadata will matter. I don't know if, Joe, if it mattered in your New Hampshire, people don't much like that stuff.
I was just going to say, New Hampshire, live free or die state, libertarian state.
No, part of the Republican
it's all
Party.
about security now, though, and I think Governor Christie is on the right side of that issue.
And you think Cruz is on the wrong side of it?
Oh, yes.
Endgame time, and the panel is here. I want to talk about Colorado here, Molly. Look, we're now getting reports from law enforcement officials that may have been politically motivated. We heard what Planned Parenthood said. Democrats have been on one side of quickly coming out in support of Planned Parenthood. Republicans have been very hesitant about what they've said.
Well, and that seems obvious to me, right? This is an event that plays right into two major issues for the Democrats. And I think what it illustrates is the extent to which this election is again going to be a culture war on domestic issues. You have the Democrats really leaning into these issues that they used to be afraid of, being very strongly pro-abortion rights, standing with Planned Parenthood. That was a talking point, you know, long before this happened, but also really leaning into these Second Amendment issues that Democrats have been so afraid of forever because they're so alienating to a lot of rural voters. Now you have the Democrats feeling like the demographics are on their side, the culture is on their side. I don't know if that's true, but that's
the politics I got raised on is totally what you said. Republicans win on the culture wars, Democrats lose. Now Democrats are the ones that want a culture war.
Exactly, and we don't know this homicidal man. We don't know his mental state and what really prompted him, although there are some indicators. But the Second Amendment issue, the gun issue, is where Democrats really are coming together.
Well, we had a gun. I mean,
we know he had a gun, and you had Donald Trump saying after Paris, after Chattanooga, they should have been armed. Well, that is a completely different response than you're getting from Democrats.
Joe, I'm curious. In New Hampshire, you know, it used to be Democrats were always a little bit cautious on gun issues, particularly Democratic nominees for president, because they wanted to continue to carry places that were rural populations, Iowa, New Hampshire, that are more, where the Democrats are more pro-gun rights. Has things shifted in New Hampshire where it's really now polarized?
I don't think so, and I think it's awful early to be criticizing Republicans for not jumping on the issue in Colorado until you see the specifics of the issue. But as far as guns in New Hampshire, if Hillary Clinton, who won 8 years ago, and I expect she would win this time, not Bernie Sanders, she's going to have to waltz on the gun issue. Bernie Sanders is a gun guy from next door in Vermont. So I don't think it's going to play the way it may play in other districts.
You know, Chuck, you said to Mr. Trump, words matter when you're running for president. In 2012, a domestic terrorist, Floyd Corkins, attacked the Family Research Council because they were against same-sex marriage. It was a terrorist attack. This was another terrorist attack. Words do matter, but they can't back people away from the
Should we be describing these as,
issues.
it's interesting you say that, these are domestic terrorist attacks?
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we should be using that language. Jim.
Absolutely. We should be, and you're right to cite that earlier incident and this incident. They're both domestic terrorism incidents, and we need to use that word. You know, it's a scary word for a lot of people, but that's what it is. It's violence to achieve political aims.
And a lot of crazy people out there are impacted by rhetoric, and so when you
well, that's what I'm
Trump,
thinking. It's like wondering. It's like we call it this, but you're right. I mean, the mentally disturbed are the ones that are looking to create a rationalization for themselves.
Well, what was the impact in the 1970s when the rate of domestic terrorism in this country was far from what it is now? Yeah. Much, much higher, with bombings, and these were people with political ends. They weren't terror.
Well, the rhetoric of the SDS an impact on the weathermen. They went underground and they did kill people, and that's why rhetoric matters. But at the same time, we can't sanitize an issue. I will talk about the Planned Parenthood practices. They were selling baby parts. I will be happy to engage people, but I think we do have to recognize there are disturbed people on both ends of the spectrum who can be impacted by this.